Welcome back. Now, a group of South African Christian leaders is in Bethlehem have shown solidarity with Palestinians by praying for an end to the war between Israel and Hamas. Now, the group includes Father Michael Weeder and Reverend Frank Chikane. Let's reflect on the conflict with Professor Farid Esack from the University of Johannesburg's Department of Religion. Prof, Merry Christmas and thank you so much for your time and for joining us this afternoon. South Africa, as I've said, currently has a delegation of Christian leaders in Bethlehem. How significant is it for them to be spending Christmas in Bethlehem at the birthplace of Jesus, especially during such a time?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, and a blessed Christmas to all your viewers who are marking the day. The mission of this group of Christian leaders is basically to be with the Palestinians in what is a very difficult time in their lives, but also on a significant day, the day that celebrates the coming into this world of Jesus Christ. And it's a day that normally, especially in a city like Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christ, it's a day that calls for celebration. And the presence of South African Christian leaders and leaders from other parts of the world in Bethlehem is a cause for much happiness amongst the Palestinians, particularly the Christians in Bethlehem. I've been watching a number of Christmas services that were held, and it is in some ways very, very moving that these Christians in Palestine can actually draw solace from the presence of religious leaders or Christian leaders, particularly from South Africa. So at a superficial glance, it may not be much that a contingent of about 15 to 20 Christian leaders are in Palestine at the moment. So what? But the meaning that this offers for the Palestinians at such a dark period in their lives, I don't think that it can be underestimated. Particularly the presence of South Africans who in some ways have lived through dark days of dispossession from their homes under the Group Areas Act, or life in the shadow of apartheid, life or death under the shadow of apartheid. So Palestinians continue to look up to South Africans very much, and therefore this visit is of particular significance. What is also consequential is from Tel Aviv, they'll go back to Tel Aviv, and from there, unfortunately, they have to fly to Egypt, and from Egypt move over by land to the Rafah border, where they will try to enter Gaza in the next day or two. And of course, all of us know the narrative of Gaza at the moment, and that is, of course, of double significance for the Palestinian people.
Prof, many seem to confine the conflict to the 7th of October this year, but we know that the plight of Palestinians has been ongoing since 1948. Why should the world be more cognizant now more than ever of what is happening in Palestine?
So on the one hand, yes, you're right, that the disaster or the devastation for the Palestinians was marked as early as 1948. And at the same time, the scale of the genocide that we are witnessing in Palestine, more specifically in Gaza, but not confined to Gaza, also on the West Bank, the extent of the genocide that is being wreaked upon the Palestinian people, it is unprecedented. The extent of the bombings and the civilian deaths is far more than what we have ever seen in a comparable conflict in the 20th century. So not only is the actual genocide, but the huge difference between this genocide and other genocides that have confronted people in the last more than a century is that it is announced that we want to annihilate these people. And this announcement gives the Israeli bombardment a particularly macabre, a particularly horrific dimension. And this is why all of us are required to protest, not just to lament, to protest the devastation that we're seeing in the Holy Land.
I mean, Prof, as you mentioned earlier on, that many Palestinians look up to the fact that South African spiritual leaders, Christian leaders, are in Bethlehem currently in support of who they are, simply based on the comparisons between the apartheid regime in South Africa and what is happening with them, between them and Israel. But the level of murders and displacements happening in Gaza, certainly a genocide there, as described by Reverend Chikane, who currently is there as a primitive war. What's your take on the support that Israel enjoys from some parts of the West?
Well, you are right in describing it as some parts of the West. And it is clearly, I mean, the West has never really taken principled positions on anything. They take positions that are in their narrow interest. And here, I mean, it's a huge challenge for many Zionists or supporters of Israel to kind of reflect, you know, if in your analysis, your only support that you have comes from other colonial powers, what does it say about your cause? There has to be something wrong about your cause if the only people that seriously stand up for it are people who've got a history of genocide, either against native peoples, as in the United States, or an ongoing history of crimes, whether it was the atom bombs dropped on Hiroshima, or whether it is the Nazi Germany regime against the Jewish people. What does it say about your cause when the only people that really identify with you are other white people, are other powerful people, are other people whose hands are as dirty as what the hands of the global North is? So this should be a cause for some reflection on those who continue to think that the Palestinians are the problem and Israel is the solution.
And how much, Prof, is there going to be of an influence from this international delegation, especially in getting the much-needed aid that needs to get to Gaza?
I mean, look, you know, the value of this delegation is at a symbolic level. At a real political level, at a level of alleviating the suffering of the Palestinian people, I don't think that we should overestimate our power or the ability of this delegation. This delegation, as far as the Israelis are concerned, it is completely inconsequential. In fact, that is why the Israelis allowed the delegation in. So I don't think that it is of any consequence really in terms of bringing the tangible humanitarian relief to the Palestinians. I think that if the United States, well, certainly at a very superficial level, has not been able to really turn the screws onto Israel, a delegation from South Africa, quite frankly, is not going to be of any consequence.
Lastly, Prof, I mean, the Israeli Prime Minister recently said that the conflict will continue until they have total victory over Hamas. Is there any hope for there to be an end to this war? And what would that end look like?
Well, I think that all of us, we live in hope. So that is the first thing. The second thing is, if one thinks that this war is one against Hamas, or that only the annihilation of Hamas will lead to an end of the war, you're really living in a fool's paradise. the truth is that Hamas represents a larger resistance of the Palestinian people. Whether they completely agree with the long-term vision of Hamas and its commitment to Islam as a religion or not, for Christians, for Muslims in Palestine, Hamas represents something far more than that. Hamas is not just an actual fighting force in Gaza. It is an entity that is entrenched throughout Palestine and amongst Palestinians who are also living in what is now described as Israel, quote unquote, proper. So the whole idea that Hamas can be annihilated, I mean, we've seen just in the short period of about 80 days, the way the Israelis spoke about, an end to this conflict immediately. Wait, it's now 80 days and Hamas shows every bit of an ability to resist and ability to continue with the struggle. And so, no, when Netanyahu says that they will fight until Hamas is completely destroyed, well, they would have to throw their bombs onto the Palestinians in the West Bank and everywhere else. So the Palestinians are not going to die. Now, I'm not saying that Hamas is synonymous with the Palestinian resistance, but at the moment, Hamas certainly represents the determination of the Palestinians to have freedom in their lifetime.
All right, Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. It certainly has been very valuable. Thank you for giving us your time today. That was Professor Farid Esack from the University of Johannesburg's Department of Religion.